Hey friends, welcome to Flight Test Tech. I'm Josh, and today we're going to be doing a build, tune, fly on our new DHC-2 Beaver. If you guys haven't heard of the new DHC-2 Beaver, it's our new P&P microline that we've come out with. This is our first exploration in the world of actual molded airplanes, and honestly, this is one of my favorite ones. What the build, tune, fly is going to teach you is kind of be a virtual manual. I'm going to guide you step by step through the building of this. Then we're going to go ahead and do the tuning together, which is going to be the radio setup. And then we're going to go out to the field and we're going to fly it together. And I'm going to give you tips and tricks on some of the things that this plane does exceptionally well, but also how to have the best experience possible. So obviously we can't get our materials in order. You're going to need a DHC-2 Beaver to be able to build along with me, but you'll be able to go from bench to flight in probably about 30 minutes. Let's go ahead and get started. All right. So you're gonna see that everything in this kit hopefully comes very well packaged. This is our first time ever doing this, so if anything's ever damaged out of the box, please do us a favor and contact us. We want you to have the best experience possible. The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna get all of our pieces unboxed, and I'm just gonna go through and give you a component identification. Fuselage, our pontoons, our wing, our landing gear kit, our prop, our hardware pack, and our adapter kit. Now once you have everything out of the box, take your time and inspect each piece to make sure there's no damage or no problems. If you guys have any issues whatsoever, please contact us because we want you to have a really great experience. The configuration we're going to be putting together is going to be the landing gear configuration. So we're going to go ahead and put our floats off to the side right now and put our attention mainly towards the fuselage here. Our first step is we're going to go ahead and unpackage our little hardware pack. We're going to remove our two struts, our Velcro, and our screw pack. We're going to leave the rest of the accessories in here. You're going to notice that you have some extra hardware like your flat push rods. You're going to have some control horns in here, some extra linkage stoppers. These are all for the optional flaps. To make life a little bit easier, we're going to go ahead and remove the cowling and the top hatch. If you're using something like an FR Sky receiver that uses the micro connectors, this is going to be a direct plug and play, and the only adapter you're going to need to use is an adapter to go from JR to FR Sky Micro. Now if you're using the Spectrum Micro, these two little wires here are going to be reversed. You have a couple different options here. You can go ahead and lift up and remove the prongs and switch it, or we do have an accessory kit which has the actual adapters that switch everything around the way they're supposed to be. So for right now we're going to be using our full-size Spectrum receiver. I'm actually going to be putting a 6-channel in here. It'll carry the weight just fine. One, and we're going to go ahead and plug these in. There's two. We're not going to need one for our JR connector that you see right here, so we can go ahead and leave that one alone. And then the final one is going to be for our Y connector right here. Make sure whenever you put these connectors in that they're actually lining up ground to ground, which may be brown to black, red in the middle, and then the signal wire, which will be either orange or white on the far side. Our next step is we're going to go ahead and install our receiver. Now I'm kind of getting obnoxious here and using the biggest receiver I possibly can just to show you that this can carry the weight. Obviously the lighter you go, the easier it's going to be. Now we were flying in the reveal video, we were flying with this exact same receiver, and I do like it because it doesn't have any antennas external on it. You can also get the 4-channel full range version as well. We're going to be doing some FPV later with this, and I want to get the furthest range possible, so I'm going to be using a full range receiver just so I can have some fun and not worry about signal strength. Our first step is we're going to go ahead and put our throttle into port 1. You're going to notice that port 1, and it's saying data on the top here. The light line is going to be on the very top, and we're just going to slide it in. Channel number 2 is our ailerons. Our ailerons are on the wing, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that blank. Our next is our elevator. I'm going to go ahead and plug that in, and then I'll go into port number 3. And our final one is rudder. Now sometimes I get the elevator and rudder backwards. No big deal. All you have to do is just swap them out. I'm going to go ahead and leave this loose right now. This may look big, but this only weighs about maybe 6 or 7 grams. For our next step, let's go ahead and plug our ailerons in. Notice I'm not putting anything together here because I want to cycle all the controls to make sure I have it mapped out right. There we go. Now that we have all our connections made, let's go ahead and power on the receiver and we'll bind it. As you notice, my prop is off right now. It's always a good idea to keep your props off until everything is tuned. For binding this type of receiver, all I simply need to do is hold down the bind button while I plug it in. There we go. You'll notice I'm holding my transmitter at least 4 feet away. That gives us the most reliability to be able to bind the first time. If you ever have difficulties binding, make sure that you move the transmitter far enough away from the receiver because sometimes they'll be too close to connect. Alright, so now at this point everything's all bound up, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make sure that all my controls work properly. So for this, I'm just going to simply loosely put this plane together like this. To do this, when I pull back on the stick, I should see the elevator going up. In this case, the elevator is going down, and I don't want that, so I'm going to need to reverse my elevator. Let's go ahead and look at the rudder now. When I move my rudder to the right and left, it should go right and left, and that's just fine. For my ailerons, when I push the stick to the left, my left aileron should go up, and that's fine. In this case, the only channel that I need to reverse is my elevator. We're going to go ahead and do that right now. Alright, every radio is a little bit different, but for this one, I simply went into servo setup, scrolled over to the reverse, went to my elevator, and reversed it. Now you can see when I go up and down that this is proper. When I pull back on the stick, the elevator goes up. Our next step that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go ahead and adjust our rates. Now for people that fly advanced, this may be just fine for them and they may want to dial just the expo, which softens the center mode down a little bit. But for the best experience right out of the box, I strongly recommend dialing your low rates to 12 degrees and your high rates to 16. This is going to be roughly 75%. Let's go ahead and do that right now. So for our dual rates and expo, this is something I'd strongly recommend doing. If you're using a radio like a DXE or something with pre-rate dual rate expos, you're going to be just fine because it's already dialed in with roughly 30% expo, and the low rate should be very close to what you need. For this, I'm going to go into my dual rates. I'm going to go in from 100% to about 85 on my ailerons. And I'm going to go to positive 30 for my expo. For my 12 degrees, what I mean by 12 degrees is I want to see roughly a 12 degree deflection up and down when I give it aileron. So in this case, when I go up, the aileron should move 12 degrees. When I go down, the aileron should move 12 degrees. We're going to do the same process now on the elevator and the rudder. Alright, so for a brief recap, we went ahead and made sure our servos were centered, and we also dialed in our dual rates and our expos, which are going to give us roughly 12 degrees and 30% expo. This is going to be a really great first flight experience. You can always dial this up or down based on the type of flying that you want to do. All the control surfaces should be centered from the factory, but if any are slightly off or not to your preference, you can go ahead and adjust those through the linkages on the airplane rather than messing with your sub trims. To do that, all you simply need to do is take your screwdriver, loosen up the linkage stopper, move your control to the center, and then tighten it down. Be really careful not to put too much pressure on the servos or you could strip them out. One thing that we don't want to have happen is for the receiver to be bouncing around and potentially jam up the servos. To do this, you can use either hot glue or a roll of double-sided tape to be able to take off a little piece and stick it. For mounting this receiver, my favorite location is going to be right down here. As I mentioned before, this plane also will accept our new FT Aura 5, and this is going to be the location of our control board. I'd highly recommend, if you like stabilized flight, especially on these smaller microplanes, out of the box, the FT Aura 5 works absolutely perfect, and also all these sub trims and adjustments that you're doing can be done right from the transmitter and from the board with no tweaking or tuning. If you'd like to see more about putting the aura specifically in this plane, we have that video linked down below in the description. Make sure whenever you mount any kind of electronics or hardware that the controls can move all directions without hitting any wires or the transmitter itself. Now that we've checked all of our controls, we can go ahead and disconnect our battery and install our wing. To install our wing, the front tab of the wing leading edge is going to go ahead and insert down on the wing support, and the trailing edge will press down in place. The mounting screw for the wing is going to be found inside here, and you're going to notice that it's the longest screw in the bag. I'm just going to use our little Flite test number 4 screwdriver and screw it down in place. For putting on the struts, we're going to allow the tail to fall over the edge of the workbench just so we don't damage it. We're now going to take our 2 carbon fiber struts and mount those using the shorter screws that were included in our hardware pack. Make sure you don't over tighten these screws and strip them out. There you go. Notice I'm holding the wing slightly off the table because this plane has a little bit of dihedral, and these struts are going to hold that dihedral in place. Same process on the other side. Our wing's now fastened in place. While this is on its back, let's go ahead and also put on our landing gear. The Beaver does have a steerable landing gear and can also be interchanged with the steerable rudder. That way you don't have any complicated linkages going down to the pontoons. To install our tail wheel, we're going to go ahead and take it and we're going to line it up with the center tab right in the rudder and then press down carefully and directly. There we go. Installing the landing gears is incredibly easy. One thing is this is incredibly lightweight and frankly fairly fragile foam. Make sure that when you're pressing this in that you're not grabbing it by this piece right here. We're going to go ahead and hold this over, slide 1 down, and slide 2 down. We can now flip this over on the main landing gear. You're going to notice from the ESC we have 3 sets of wires right here. Rather than tucking this in and kind of crowding our battery compartment, I'm going to kind of tuck this down just on the side here. And if you notice that our cowling has a cutout right here, I'm going to go ahead and slide this over until the magnets engage. You want to make sure that the motor spins nice and free, nothing's rubbing, but you can see that all those wires are nice and safely put right over on the side here out of the way. Now that our cowling is on, let's go ahead and install our prop. Now one thing I'd recommend if you're going to be flying off of floats, and especially in a little bit more bumpy water, switch to a 5-inch prop that unfortunately isn't included in your kit. This prop works phenomenal for high efficiency off of snow, smooth surfaces, but if you do have choppy water, you're going to have this actually kicking up a little bit of water, and it's not a bad idea to switch to a smaller prop. You're going to sacrifice a little bit of power, but also have a lot more efficiency. To install our prop, we're going to make sure that the numbers are facing forward. Then simply twist on the spinner. There we go. It's really handy to keep a small little Allen key or a small screwdriver around. Simply push this down. Don't worry about over tightening it too much. And your prop is on. For our battery, we're going to pick the opposite face. Now I always say fuzzy fuselage, but lately I've been going to where the fuzzy's on the battery. That way when I stick it in my pocket, I don't pull all the lint out of my battery. So in this case, I'm going to be putting the prickly down on the fuselage. And where that's going to go is going to be right on this section right here. Our next step is going to be installing the battery. Now I'm going to be showing you the largest possible battery you can put in here, which is roughly about 500 milliamps, 550 milliamps, 2-cell. Where we place the battery is going to decide how our plane balances. For this battery, which is the largest battery this can carry, we're going to put this all the way where it butts up against the back of the motor and presses down. I really wanted this airplane to have as much capacity in there as possible, whether it's FPV gear, whether it's long flight times with a larger battery, or it's just getting your hands in there to be able to work it. This will be able to hold a really large battery and give you over 10 minutes of flight time. All right, let's go ahead and power this up. Transmitter on first. Plug in the battery second. And I'm just going to tuck this down in like this. And our last step here, we'll just put on our little cowling with our magnets. And now we're going to go ahead and check for center of gravity. The center of gravity is going to be 25 millimeters from the leading edge, roughly right around where the spar is. To check the center of gravity, we're going to put both of our fingers right on that 25 millimeter mark. And what we like to see is that the plane balances perfectly neutral or just a touch nose down. That's perfect. If you use a smaller battery, keep in mind that you're going to have to keep it much further forward, all the way against that motor most likely, to keep it balancing properly. For float assembly, we're going to go ahead and take these 2 brace wires, both of them match, and we're going to press them into the floats one at a time. For installing the floats, we're going to carefully remove the landing gear. Again, I'm going to go ahead and hold down carefully right at this point right here and rock these out. There we go. And then to install the floats, we're going to press the wires in place one side at a time. To install the water rudder, simply remove your tail wheel and replace the water rudder in the same slot that the tail wheel slid into. Always make sure that you check your center of gravity after putting the floats on to make sure it doesn't need to be moved forwards or backwards. Again, keep in mind if you're flying off of choppier water, this prop may come in contact with the water and you may want to go to a 5-inch prop to have the best experience. An easy way to remove the floats is simply take your 2 fingers, rotate it against the fuselage, and they'll pop right off. Let's go ahead and put the landing gear back on. At this point, our plane is all assembled, the CG is right, the control throws are right. We're ready to go outside where we're going to show you tips and tricks how to get the best flight experience and also what the DHC-2 Beaver can do. Alright, we are blessed with a beautiful day. It's not too windy, a little bit of wind, but whether there's a lot of wind or a little bit, you always want to toss it into the wind here. Now for this plane specifically, this is one of my favorite planes to land and take off of a hard surface here. It handles the ground really, really well, and I think for a maiden, that's exactly what we're going to go ahead and do. Once again, we're going to make sure all of our controls are going the right direction, everything is balanced, and we're ready to put this in the air. As I mentioned in the open of this Build, Tune, Fly video, this plane has a couple benefits and a couple drawbacks. One thing that you're probably used to with a micro airplane is that it can't handle the wind very well. This one actually does exceptionally well in more windy weather, but the counter to that is it's going to be flying a little bit faster. So you're not going to be flying off the prop nice and slow, you're going to be flying off the wings. If any of you guys have ever flown any of our Mighty Mini series, this is going to fly exactly the same way as what you'd see our typical Mighty Minis fly, like whether it's the Sportster or the Mustang, maybe just a touch slower. Cool? But what you're going to benefit from is a lot more durability and a lot more versatility as well. Alright, let's go ahead and put this in the air. Now for takeoff here, we're going to go ahead and give gradual throttle into the wind and let the airplane kind of elevate itself here. Once we're in the air, we're going to go and trim it out, and then we'll start seeing what it can do. Alright, into the wind. Good. Good. Slow gradual throttle. And she takes off nice and clean. Gonna give just a little bit of down trim here. And you can see I don't have the Aura board on. When I fly with the Aura, you're not going to see any of this dipping, but the plane is still very easy to manage even in this moderate wind. Give a nice slow flyby here, show you how well it can slow down. We'll go ahead and pull vertical. Little wing over at the top. And a big lazy loop. You can see this plane, if you kind of compare the size, it's very close to like what you'd see a mini Timber would be, but it definitely flies a little bit faster, but it's still incredibly maneuverable. One of my favorite things about the Beaver is how capable it is aerobatically. The Hobbyco Beaver was one of the first ones I really got to appreciate this with, and one of the reasons why we chose the Mini Beaver to be a candidate for one of our first P&Ps. It's incredibly docile, even when you're doing things that the scale one would never want to do. Now I'm going to save a little bit of battery, and we're going to go ahead and pop the pontoons on, and we'll take it off the water. So for our landings, we're going to fly the wing the whole way in, and what I mean is we're going to keep its glide slope, not try to pull it behind the throttle curve. We're going to bleed off our airspeed slowly, and she'll settle down just beautifully. This is probably one of the easiest planes I've ever had that are micro-sized to land. Again, this is with no Aura 5 inside, and it performs amazing. This is definitely an incredibly easy plane to fly. I wouldn't call this a beginner just because micro sizes typically, require some discipline when you're flying. If you are a beginner though, you could have a great experience. Just drop that FT Aura 5 board in, access the level assist, the bank assist features, and also the launch assist features. It's going to make the whole experience wonderful. We have a little tiny lake down here. The wind's not too bad. Let's go ahead and take it off the lake and see how she flies. So a couple things whenever you're flying off the water. First of all, micros and choppy water don't mix. So wait for calm days, or if you're flying off of snow, astroturf, these kind of floats are awesome because it'll help you kind of glide over the grass Even on a wet golf green, sometimes it'll perform better than wheels itself. It's also really good to add lower center of gravity, and it keeps the plane nice and stable. What you always want to do though is take off into the wind. This is a non-negotiable, and also you may find the tendency to try to get it off the water quicker than you should. Let the plane gain speed, get up on the little tiny step here where it's breaking that friction, and naturally fly off before you get aggressive on the elevator. This is really important because if you try to make it fly too soon, you're going to tip stall or stall into the water, and nothing good happens then. All right, let's go ahead and go to the opposite side, and we'll go ahead and take it off. Like I said in the build video, if you're flying off of choppier water, you may want to consider actually going to a 5-inch prop. It'll make life a little bit easier. All right, let's go ahead and take it off. So you can see when I initially gave it throttle, the prop actually went down and bit it. A little bit of up elevator as it gains speed, and then relaxing that back pressure is going to be the trick to make sure that your plane transitions on the step really smoothly. There you go. Now the plane doesn't have near as much power with the floats, but I love how smooth it flies when they're on. Also, it looks so cool. Cruising with pontoons is about 65% throttle. Alright, it's really crucial that you're comfortable flying this airplane because you're not going to want to stall this out. You're going to want to bring the plane down with speed and let it gently touch the water. Full back pressure, and we're good. Now notice when I'm taxiing, I'm holding full back pressure here to keep that water rudder in and planted nice. Look how great that looks. All right, friends, I want to thank you for watching. Also, my sincerest apologies. Typically when we do a build tune fly, it's right when the product comes out. We're at least a couple months late on this, but you can count as we get new models, whether it's the Adventure, whether it's the Widgeon, whether it's our new kit box coming out. You can count on a build tune fly to be there ready to walk you through step by step with building, with tuning, and of course flying, and all the tips and tricks in between. Thank you so much for your support. If you're watching this video, this is now available in our store. This is how we actually are able to fund so many of our videos and our activities that enable us to do positive things in the community. So thank you for your support, and we'll see you next time.